Hello, BookTube. We're at part 4 of our October Q&A, and we are moving on to Mayberry Book Club. Oh my, well-known troublemaker. How is your October Proust project going? This came up in an earlier question. I'm not sure where this misapprehension is coming from. It was always a November Proust project, Proust-vember. I don't know why so many of you have been mistaken on that point, but nevertheless, I wouldn't know how the Proust-hember vision is going because we haven't reached it yet. It's still a ways away. And also, what is an in-canon Superman story or graphic novel you would recommend to newbies? Depends on what you mean by in-canon. Good Lord, every auteur with a coffee table full of cocaine immediately wants to rewrite Superman's origin story. Then the go-to answer here would be a Superman for All Seasons. I'm not sure that I like it as much as everybody else does. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow is a Superman story I have recommended many, many times, but it's got stuff going on in it that not everybody would really get. There was a reason why Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow was written and published when it was, and if you don't know that reason, you're going to miss out on some of the enjoyment of it. But some of the best Superman stories that I have read have been things that may or may not be in continuity. There was one with incredible artwork by Stuart Immonen called Superman's Secret Identity that I've talked about on this channel. And it's not about the canonical Superman, but it is a great Superman story. I'll have to do a starter kit. Let's see here. CM Spiff says, number 1, are you aware of any books about Padre Pio that aren't written from a faith-based perspective? No. Number 2, in your travels to popular pilgrimage sites like Fatima, Guadalupe, and Lourdes, what was your impression of them? Did they feel like actual special places or more like tourist traps? I'm sure that they are cynosures of a great deal of genuine faith, but they just struck me as ordinary places. Lourdes especially, I could not get the famous quip out of my mind. The once upon a time when you went to Lourdes, you would see a huge collection of crutches that had been left behind by people who had been cured. And this was true in many, many other holy places. So who knows where the provenance of this anecdote. But the anecdote is, that's not convincing. What would be convincing would be a pile of wooden legs left behind. And there aren't any. And so I went to these places and definitely knew them for what they were, but I didn't feel anything special. No. Of course, because there's nothing special about them. Let's see here. Jenny Park says, would you consider making a video about novelizations and tie-in books? Oh, that's a great idea. I have a friend who says they're dumb and to just watch the movie or show. Well, watching the movie is always preferable to reading a dumb, boring book. And it's also true that a lot of tie-ins and movie adaptations are very poor because the writer is the last thing that the studio executives think about. And they're not being paid well, and they're being given a crushing deadline. 90, 100,000 words in a few weeks. That's not going to be a problem, is it? And they're often given a preliminary script. So not even the thing that you're going to see, not even the thing that's been fine-tuned, usually for the better, before it gets to the big screen. But there are exceptions. There have been quite a few exceptions. I'll have to make a video on that. Let's see here. Sean Graham says, did you ever meet Edward Gorey during your trips to the Cape Cod area? Nope. You mentioned him the other day, and it got me thinking. Nope. I've met many, many famous people who went in and out of Cape Cod, but he was not one of them. Hugo Simeo says, hi, hope you're doing well. For some reason, time machines are on my mind. So here are some time machine questions. Number 1, how would functional time machines change the world? They'd ruin the world, wouldn't they? I mean, there'd be nothing left in a few seconds, would there? Depends on what you mean by functional. Is functional widely available? I don't know. If a functional time machine is widely available, if anybody can go back in time, and it's not regulated, that would change a lot, I would think, wouldn't it? And how often do you use it? How energy intensive is it? I don't know. I don't imagine there'd be much left. Number 2, if you could, would you use one? And if yes, what would you do with it? Well, the stereotypical example would be to go back in time and kill teenage Adolf Hitler, right? Or kill baby Hitler, I guess, was the thing that went viral on social media. I had no idea how to understand the people who said not to do that. Who said if they were standing over his cradle and history was going to unfold the way it was going to unfold, they wouldn't do it anyway because a baby is innocent. If history is going to unfold, if history is locked in place, well, that history was caused by that one person. Get rid of that one person. Chances are overwhelmingly likely that history would not happen anywhere near the same way. Hitler equals Holocaust is what I'm trying to say. So that use of a time machine seems to me to be self-evident. If I had like a time machine wristwatch so that I could just pop just to a million different places, and the million different places wouldn't matter because you could eat up the time by saving with the time machine. So it wouldn't even be time consuming. If I had a machine like that, I would probably use it for a little bit of the aforementioned genocide myself. I would probably make sure that Homo sapiens sapiens did not arise on this planet. I think that would be better for just about everybody else who's ever going to arise on this planet. I might make use of it that way. But see, that's what I'm saying. Somebody would also make use of that to make sure that I never did that. Right? Or in a million different ways. Time machine stories have always bothered me for this reason. And number 3, your favorite book featuring time machine. I'm going to punt and say that H.G. Wells. I've never read a time travel story that I thought was done really well. Hamilton Thompson asks, "Hello, Steve. I've just recently discovered your wonderful channel." I don't know how wonderful you're thinking it is now. This is like root canal. But thank you. Welcome. We do have a lot of fun here, these long, sententious Q&A videos notwithstanding. When, if you're not reading, what other pastimes do you enjoy? Oh, you are new here, aren't you? Well, I read and write for a living. I read books and write about them for a living. And it's also my passion. As anybody who's spent any time with me will know, it's not just a job. I love it. Deeply, deeply love it. I effectively don't do anything else. I have a 10-pound little dog. She's on the bed over there. And I talk with her all day long. I smooch with her quite often, sometimes elaborately. We go for walks whenever she wants them. I divert her with play whenever she's feeling a little bored. She's a big part of my day, but all the rest of it is reading and writing, I'm afraid. That's virtually nothing. I mean, what you're expecting here is that occasionally I make a weekly, racquetball appointment with, my investment broker or whatever. Nothing like that happens. Nothing like that happens. Once upon a time in the pre-COVID days, once a month or so, I would have a group of people over here for a Lady Carberry literary soiree of some kind or other. A very low-key, very low-brow literary soiree. We would just swap gossip about which author is sleeping with which author. And we would eat a ton of food, drink a ton of wine, abuse each other liberally, and that was so much fun to do that with publicists or authors or other reviewers. COVID put an end to that. There's no way to do that with a clear conscience now. You'd worry the whole time. And I don't know if that's ever coming back. But even that was literary. Even that was entirely devoted to books and writing. So pastimes, I don't have many other than reading and writing. I'm sorry, that makes me the most boring person on BookTube. PHXSNS1 says, number 1, what do you think of Grail Marcus's writing? I like it. It's punchy and effective. I don't worship it. The way I know this author has worshipers. And the writing's never resonated with me that way. And number 2, do you have any favorite biographies of popular singers or musicians? Well, it came up in this Q&A. Bob Spitz's group biography of the Beatles is amazing. You will absolutely love it. I thought it was fantastic. So I recommend that. Trish Boville says, what, if any, podcasts do you listen to? Are there any you can recommend if you do? I don't listen to podcasts. No. They require you to listen to them. They're not background music. They require you to listen to them. I can't listen to a podcast and read at the same time. Maybe some of you can, but I can't. And I have to confess, it's not just the use of my time. It's also the podcasts themselves. I've had so many podcast recommendations from so many of you over the years. And I mostly hear people just spinning their wheels. You didn't bother to write down the facts ahead of time. You knew what you were going to be talking about. You're still saying, I think it was so-and-so. I think they wrote it such a place. I'm not really sure. You've got people doing rhetorical throat clearing for half an hour at a time, saying nothing, literally nothing, just circling back on saying nothing over and over again. There was actually a little comedy skit that went around on Twitter a while ago where somebody parodied that. These two dudes talking to each other on a podcast, saying literally nothing for 20 solid minutes. And the thing about that little skit, I'll try to post it if I can find it. But that thing about that little skit is that it was totally real. It was the best kind of satire in that it was photographic reality. I found very few podcasts that I really like. I've tried a bunch of bookish ones, a bunch of politics ones, and they don't do it for me. Let's see here. Frederick says, you mentioned Quentin Crisp in a recent video, and then you you give the quote that I didn't give in my video because I don't want to be hashtagged. What are your thoughts on Quentin Crisp? I think he's fantastic. Would you recommend The Naked Civil Servant and his other books? Feel free to give a long, rambly answer. I enjoy them. Well, I appreciate that you enjoy them, but I can't give long, rambly answers in a Q&A. But I would recommend his books. Yeah, I don't know how in print he is, but I'd recommend his books. Michael Moore says, a quick question from England. What are your thoughts on an author I have not heard you mention? That is to say that you have never mentioned her. I think you mean that is not to say you've never mentioned her. And she is Joyce Carol Oates. Yes, your channel goes from strength to strength. Kind regards. I'm not sure there were any strengths to begin with, but I like Joyce Carol Oates. She's prolific after my own heart. And you would think with an author that prolific, there'd be quite a bit that I wouldn't like, but I read very few misfires from her. I try to read everything. I think she's a major author, so I try to read everything, but I find very little that is a waste of my time. I can't remember the last time I read something of hers that I thought was a waste of my time. So I like her. Anthony Ruggier has a barrage of questions. Number one, do you know of any good unabridged editions of Pope's Dunciad? There ought to be a heavily annotated, unabridged Dunciad in the Penguin Classic line. There ought to be. The problem is, if it's unabridged and it's fully annotated, it's going to take a lot of annotation. Every single line, every single half line in the Dunciad requires a long footnote. It's intensely topical humor, but it's important, I think, in a way that Pope has just been generally neglected. But to have the Dunciad have no popular edition, that is just shameful. So no, I don't know of any. If there is one, I'd love to hear about it. Number two, is Stefan Zweig's biography of Joseph Fouché good? No. Number three, do you think Lepanto is Chesterton's greatest poem? No. And I'm not sure that these questions, they increasingly seem to me not to belong in a Q&A, but rather in an email. Number four, have you got a copy of that new edition of Churchill's The River War yet? No, I haven't. I've seen it. A number of viewers have got it. I must just not know the right fairy godmother to drop it in my cradle, because it hasn't come to me yet. And number five, can you recommend any books on the Mahdist Rebellion and Kitchener's expedition to Khartoum? No. I'm not an expert on either one of those things. William Fett says, what are your thoughts on James Baldwin? He's great. I just finished reading The Need of Change by Julian Street. What do you think of this author? I like Julian Street. But what a shift. I much more like James Baldwin. Bas Van Dyke says, number one, have you read, excuse me, what did you, that is a reference to the fact that my friend Deb always sends up alarms when people ask me a have you ever read question, because I'm going to go crazy on them. I'm going to try and control myself here. What do you think of the novels of Piranesi by Susanna Clarke? I thought it was wonderful. Just wonderful. And No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. It was awful. Junk. It's junk. Number two, have you visited the Dominicanen bookshop in Maastricht, the Netherlands, which is located inside a church? He says he lives nearby. How I envy living nearby. It's a sight to see. I didn't get anything. I wasn't buying books, but it was a sight to see. I have visited it. Naute18, how are we doing for time? We're fine. Says, where were you on Friday, November 22nd, 1963, particularly between the hours of 12 noon and 1 Central Standard Time? Please provide a full and detailed account of your whereabouts and movements on that fateful day. Well, of course, it happened long before I was born, since I am a sexy, raven-haired, smoldering-eyed 28-year-old. Hypothetically, my great-grandfather would have been working in a bookstore, would have been on his way up the elevator in Filene's, which doesn't even exist anymore. The building isn't even there anymore, to the floor to get men's socks, because just hypothetically, a beagle had destroyed his last pair of black socks, which were the fashion at the time. The elevator in Filene's at the time was run by an elevator operator who had a little seat. He never left the elevator. You didn't do anything. He did it for you. He ran the elevator up and down, called out what was on the floors, took your requests and whatnot. And on one floor, the door was popped open. Two young secretaries poked their head in and spoke the awful news. But that would be my great-grandfather. That certainly wouldn't be me. Abarami says, can you share your thoughts about Lionel Shriver, very talented novelist? What do you think about the anti-woke stance that she has taken recently? I have seen the outcry of fake outrage about all the stuff that she has said. I don't think any of the outcry is genuine. Every word of what she has said makes perfect sense. It's perfectly sensible. If you don't like her delivery, her snark can sometimes be off-putting, then read the transcripts of what she says. None of it is wrong. It's absolute common sense. And the reason why she's received so many death threats is because the cult of far-left ideologue censors that we have allowed to flourish amongst us thinks that the proper punishment for disagreeing with them is death. I always say that on this channel, and people have accused me of being hyperbolic, but I am not. And if these people get much more power, you will see that I'm not being hyperbolic. They want people who disagree with them to die. Not to change their mind, to die. They want them dead. But Lionel Schreiber has done nothing except say the obvious stuff, that we're all individuals, that taste can vary, that you ought to lighten up, you ought to learn how to take a joke, that novelists are paid to be transgressive, etc., etc. CDNK Chaos with a Z asks, what work of fiction would you consider the most unjustly forgotten by readers today? I don't know of an individual work. There are mid-20th century authors like Gilbert Sorrentino who are not well enough remembered. Or if remembered at all, Gil Sorrentino is probably entirely out of print. There are probably a bunch of other people that are like that as well. But I couldn't pick a single work. Anthony Miller says, Stephen Fry's retelling of the Odyssey is due for publication in October 2022. What did you think of his retelling of the Siege of Troy? I liked it. I'm a little bit biased on the subject. Wrote a book myself that has never been published, but I think it blows away anything else that's ever been done. And it's one of the only things I've ever written that I would say that about. But I liked it. Harfoot Falahide says, what author or book series got you into reading everything else you read today? There was no individual book or series. It was a teacher. I had one teacher who opened my eyes to what reading could be. A debt I can never repay, except to pay it forward. Tommy Umbrella says, hi, Steve. I want to ask, have you ever met Quentin Crisp? No, I have never met Quentin Crisp. Why is this? Why are you people trying to matchmake? If so, what did you think of him? Greetings from Germany. Richard Schwartz says, Graham Greene's A Gun for Sale or its film noir version, This Gun for Hire. Are you asking which I prefer? I prefer the film version. Raven with a Hare Lip or Alan Ladd? No idea what that means. Let's see here. Oh, well, speaking of having no idea what is meant by the question, we are now on to Rainbow Sky Gay and Proud. That's something of a specialty. Let's see. First question. What did you think of Arts and Letters by Edmund White, and which pieces did you like the most? I liked it quite a bit. I don't have any specific pieces to single out. Second question. What genres do you like to write in the most, and why? Well, nonfiction, of course, but you don't mean that. You mean fiction. And for fiction, I guess the thing I like most is probably science fiction because of the thrill of the world building. But that's all behind the scenes. You won't see the thrill of that if in the finished product usually. But I think that's probably what my answer would be today, because I'm currently gestating a work of science fiction. Ask me some other time, it might be something else. But I don't understand. Those questions were very straightforward. That's not like Rainbow Sky Gay and Proud. Are we feeling good? What's the next question? Third question, what do you like about David? Last question, what do you like about Davoud? And there we go. You've slipped back into normal incomprehensibility. I have no idea what those questions mean. Let's see here. Lee In says, do you like ABBA? Of course I do. What kind of a question is that? And have you ever listened to the Chess musical concept album, and what do you think of it? I don't think I know what you're talking about. Chess musical concept album? I don't think I know what that is. Krizam70 says, what is the oldest book in your collection? The oldest book would be, it's in a safe deposit box in Boston. It's a book from centuries ago that I don't touch. It's in plastic. It's in weather controlled, whatnot. What is the oldest book / text that you have read? Well, people ask this question. I never know what quite is meant by it, right? We know what the earliest texts are, and I've read them. Things like Gilgamesh. I assume that's the answer to this question, but I'm not sure. I always wonder. I mean, it's so self-evident, right? We know what the earliest texts are, and I've read them. That I always wonder if there's something else going on here. Anthony Suppa says, do you think Harold Bloom was a good writer? Yes. Yes, he was. Mary Tumulty says, were you a meteorologist in your past life? No, I just like to rant about the weather. Did you do any tornado chasing during your time in Iowa? No, I never did any tornado chasing. I've never quite understood that. But I did a lot of tornado surviving when I was in Iowa, including one time, infamously, where I was, at the time, I had a job writing op-ed, little unsigned opinion pieces for the local newspaper. And I wrote one lambasting young people for not obeying the tornado warning. There's a tornado siren that goes off when a tornado is nearby. When that happens, you're supposed to seek the right kind of tornado shelter. And I saw a bunch of young kids just flagrantly disobeying that. They wanted to see it. They wanted to see a tornado, so they were just ignoring the warning sirens. I got a whole op-ed out of it, a whole $50 for an op-ed out of that. And it was blatant hypocrisy because the reason I saw those kids is because I was one of them. I was with them. But anyway, Michael Feeney says, "What is your favorite calzone?" Well, the one that I tend to get at the place next door is a veggie calzone that they make. That's quite good. But when I'm breaking the rules, then it would be they do kind of a potpourri style calzone that's just delicious. They do a wonderful job. Kafka says, "Are science books entertainment?" Depends on whether or not they're entertaining. If they're entertaining, yeah. Parlabane is back, says, "Despite plenty of cruelty-free alternatives, many book lovers still express a preference for leather-bound editions of favorite works. Do you think the day will ever come when we will stop binding our books with the skins of our slaves?" I would hope so. I would hope that would happen. Although, in defense of some of those collectible aficionados, those older leather-bound editions, the animals have been gone for a long time. The amount of evil you're doing in the world is minimal in a case like that. Sir James H. says, "How do you speed read?" I don't speed read. The actual speed reading involves what they call gapping, where you look at a page and you train yourself to block out certain parts of the text in order to get to the end of the page faster. Certain parts of a paragraph or a sentence or a text are deemed by actual technical speed reading as not germane to the overall momentum of the thing. And that's why you get people who say they can just read like this. And I'm sure that something like that kind of training can happen, but it's useless to me. I read. It's my job to be accountable for the heft, the nuance, every word of what I read. It's my job to do that. Speed reading would be utterly useless to me. I read quickly because I devote a lot of attention to it. I don't subvocalize, and I spend a lot of time doing it, so those muscles are in excellent shape. But I don't actually speed read. Let's see here. Michael Dalloway says, "What's your favorite sandwich?" Again, with the food. A jelly sandwich. Grape jelly. Preferably with the bread lightly toasted. That is just... James Holder says, "What are the book meccas?" Well, there are quite a few of them. In America, we could say Murphy's Used Books. In Ohio, gigantic warehouse full of books. We say Powell's, the Tattered Cover, the Strand. Of course, the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston. The Book Barn in Niantic, Connecticut. 5 buildings full of books, plus ancillary buildings at another part of town. An amazing experience. Let's see here. Nyland 2 has a barrage of questions, a huge barrage of questions. Number 1, what do you think about copyright laws in the USA? Do you think they should be changed? And if so, how would you change them? Not a question for Q&A, especially when you're asking 10 other questions. I have lots of thoughts on copyright in the USA, but nothing I can boil down to a quick, off-the-cuff answer. I don't think that any fundamental changes are needed, no. Number 2, what do you think about the recent discussion about orcs being problematic in fantasy, literature, art, and video games? Specifically the idea that their depiction is too simplistic or even racist. Yes, I know it's ridiculous, but there are people who actually believe this. It's ridiculous. And the people who say this thing don't actually believe it. They want what all such people want. Power. They want power over you. They want to make you change what you do. And if they can make you change what you say or even what you believe into the bargain, so much the better. But that's all they want. There's not one person who put forward this who knows what an orc is. Who's read Tolkien. Not a one. They don't care about it at all. They also don't care about representation or racial equality. They don't care about any of the things they profess to care about. They only care about power to make you do what they say. So it's ridiculous, but also dangerous. It's also nefarious. Let's see here. We're going to go on here. What do you think about Theodore Mommsen's History of Rome? I like it. Number 4, in your video about Charles Dickens, you said that you don't like most of his books, with maybe the exception of Tale of Two Cities. Why is that so? What makes this book different or unique compared to other books by Dickens, which you don't like? Probably because Tale of Two Cities is more historical fiction than a lot of them. probably that is the case, but it'd be a long discussion of what he does in that book that he doesn't do in others. Number 5, in one of your Daily Penguins, you said that you like most Russian writer, even small minor ones. I wanted to ask, is there a Russian writer, whether classical or modern, who you actually dislike or think is overrated? That would be Nabokov. That's going to set up howls all over BookTube, but that would be Nabokov. Gracie's Reading says, do you have any advice, Steve, for people who have lost a lot of time? People that, for example, have watched their prime or youth pass them by unfulfilled. I figured you might have met a few people like this, given your background in caring and mentoring. I have met people like this. I always want to say to them, can't change the past. Despite all the time machines we were talking about earlier, you can't change the past. There's very little use in even agonizing over the past. The only thing you should do from it is learn from it. And it's never too late to do that. Never too late. If you feel that you are wandering and that you're not doing what really excites your passion, it's never too late to try that. It's never too late to start doing that. Even baby steps will get you there in very little time, in a couple of months. Very little time. Even baby steps will do it. The worst thing in the world you can do is say that you've missed your window. That is absolutely not true. The windows are all the way until the end. You haven't missed your window. If you feel that way, if you feel frustrated or unfulfilled, start doing something about it today. It's fun. Doing something about that is lots of fun. So start right away, I would say. Jack O'Hara says, you wouldn't know because, like me, you weren't born yet. Thank you. So this is going to be a hypothetical and a bit of a bleak one at that. Good Lord. What do you think it was like in the 1960s seeing all those great public figures slain? You're a bit on the grim side, aren't you? It felt like the apocalypse. It felt concerted, and it of course wasn't. But it was unavoidable, the feeling that it was concerted, that there was this dark hand that was intentionally going after these targets, and that led a lot of people, made lifelong conspiracy theorists out of a lot of people who just could not conceive that this was just the nature of the times. Pretty grim. You're right. It felt apocalyptic, and it felt concerted. Let's see here. Oscar Mendoza. How are we doing for time? We're all right. Number 1, I read and had mixed opinions of Jude the Obscure, but I really enjoyed the description of a person with a voracious desire for knowledge and education despite being born into poverty. Any books with a similar subject? Along those lines, I would certainly recommend Body and Soul by Frank Conroy. Not about literature, but about music. But Claude, the main character in that book, we see him as a little boy, and he is the largely forgotten son of a cab driver and lives in an apartment below the level of the sidewalk. He's a musical genius. He's a piano genius, but it's easily possible in the course of that book to imagine that he never gets any kind of a break and therefore never experiences it. He does, and it's thrilling. But that's what comes to mind. Number 2, the Nobel in Literature winner was announced recently. Nobody has heard of him or read him. What do you think of his books? I had never heard of him. No one has ever heard of him. I don't care, first of all, because the Nobel has no meaning. They gave it to Dylan. So they care about controversy and not about literary merit. But, I mean, it's not that I've never heard of the guy, but he was obviously chosen. Just the Nobel back to its old antics. Just the Nobel picking someone who is obscure on the international stage rather than going with any of the gigantic, titanic literary figures who year after year after year are long odds makers to win the Nobel because the public hasn't wised up to what the Nobel Committee is doing. They're not paying any attention to the kinds of things that are making the public more and more eager for, the short list of authors. Ngugi wa Thiong'o would be the one that comes quick to my mind, but there are plenty of others. The short list of authors who've never won. Every year, the anger about that gets greater because the public just doesn't get that the Nobel Committee is doing the thing they want to do, which is to have all the literati in the entire English-speaking world suddenly either say, who the hell is this guy, or write an op-ed for the New York Times for $1,500 in which they pretend they've known about this guy all along. That's the kind of thing the Nobel likes to do. So good for the author. Very good for the author. But I won't be Modiano'd again. Thank you very much. If they're going to give it to a clownish non-entity like Dario Fo, if they're going to give it to Bob Dylan, who can't even read the things that he's credited with writing, then who cares what they do? Edward Gibbon says, in your William Hazlitt Daily Penguin last year, you said that if one were to make a tiny little rowboat of all the best English prose stylists, Hazlitt would be on that rowboat. Who else would you put on that rowboat? Well, I wouldn't do it in a Q&A, now would I? It'd be a long discussion. Thank you for all that you do. You and Frida never fail to brighten my day. Well, that I can respond to. I'm very happy to hear that. I would say the pleasure is all mine, but I'm sure that we share the pleasure. It's a great deal of fun for me to do this. I'm going to have to make a video about that little rowboat because it's not a Q&A question. We're going along as we're at 30 minutes already. Here, let's stop here, and we'll come back to finish up.